Salve, dear viewer, or should I say dear judge of history. Welcome to my autobiography. Yes, it's me, Marcus Salvius Otho, better known as Emperor Otho, the brief ruler of Rome in the year 69 AD, which, spoiler alert, wasn't exactly a stellar year for emperors. Now, before you roll your eyes and skip to the part where I, like so many others, meet my untimely demise, allow me a moment to unmask myself. This is not just the tale of a Roman ruler, but a confession from beyond the grave. A defence, if you will, to posterity. After all, what does a dead man have to lose by being honest? I suppose I should start from the beginning, but I warn you, there are already hints of scandal. I was born in 32 AD, a time when the empire was bustling with intrigue, ambition, and a fair share of treachery. My father, Lucius Otho, was a senator of good standing, though some might say too good, too straight-laced, too by the book. A real bore, if you ask me. He seemed to forget that Rome was built not just on laws and virtues, but on cunning and a dash of audacity. My mother, Albia Terentia, was equally unimpressive, known more for her family name than any qualities of her own. I was their third child and the second son. They had high hopes for my older brother, but as fate would have it, they turned to me instead. Lucky them, right? I spent my early years in our family estate, surrounded by wealth and the pretense of virtue. There were the usual tutors, of course, stoic old men who tried to drill into me the glories of Greek philosophy and Roman law. It was all terribly dull. I found my real education not in the dusty scrolls of Aristotle, but in the streets of Rome, where I learned about power, desire, and ambition. Now, about my family, they weren't exactly thrilled with my chosen methods of self-education. My father, the ever-dutiful senator, hoped I'd follow in his footsteps. My mother wanted me to marry well, keep the family name pristine, and for the love of Jupiter, avoid scandal. But, scandal found me nonetheless. Or perhaps I found it. Enter Poppaea Sabina, yes, that Poppaea. Beautiful, cunning, and, of course, destined to be someone else's wife. But not just any someone, she became Nero's. Yes, that Nero, the one who would later infamously fiddle as Rome burned. He took my wife, Poppaea, and not one to be outdone, made her empress. Talk about losing your lover to the competition. My father, of course, was horrified, while my mother buried herself in her social circles, hoping the whispers would fade. Spoiler, they didn't. But let's not get too far ahead. For now, let's just say that Nero's actions planted the seed of ambition in my heart. It was a seed that would grow into a mighty, if flawed, tree. But more on that later, because this, dear viewer, is just the beginning. This is the prologue to a story of ambition, betrayal, and a dash of irony. So hold on tight. Things are about to get a lot more interesting. Tune in next time, when we explore how a disgraced young man navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics, all the way to the Imperial Throne. Who would have guessed that the man who lost his wife to an emperor would one day become one himself? Oh, the irony. But don't worry, the irony doesn't end there, it only deepens. Stay with me, dear judge. My story is only just beginning. So, where were we? Ah, yes. The scandal, the disgrace, and the beginnings of ambition. You see, when Nero stole Poppaea from me, he did more than just take my wife. He took my pride, my position, and, dare I say, my purpose. But he also gave me something in return, a front row seat to the spectacle that was Nero's court. And if there was one thing I learned from Nero, it was how not to rule. Yet, in a twist only the gods could find amusing, I still found myself chasing the very power he wielded with such reckless abandon. But I get ahead of myself. Let's step back to my early career. After the whole Poppaea debacle, I was understandably a bit of a pariah in Rome. No one wanted to be seen with me, let alone associate their political fortunes with a man who had crossed paths and wives with the mad emperor. So, like any self-respecting Roman, I took my talents elsewhere. I found myself in Lusitania, present-day Portugal, serving as governor. It was a backwater province compared to Rome, but it was still Roman, and it had its opportunities. Lusitania wasn't exactly a plum assignment, but it was here that I learned the art of governance. Oh yes, I can hear you snicker, Otho, a governor? Yes, indeed. I governed and I did it well. I quelled revolts, administered justice, and, most importantly, I made sure the taxes flowed back to Rome, smooth as the Tiber. I was good at it too. I think some were even surprised at how effective I was. But what choice did I have? I was biding my time, waiting for a moment to strike. And that moment came when the chaos in Rome reached a fever pitch. Enter Galba, older than the hills and about as exciting. He was proclaimed emperor by his legions after Nero's spectacularly undignified end. Rome was in turmoil, and Galba, bless his soul, seemed to think he could bring order with his stiff upper lip and ancient virtues. He didn't last long. Why? Because he was old, he was out of touch. And here's the kicker. He refused to pay the soldiers. The soldiers! If there's one lesson every Roman learns, it's this. Keep the legions happy. Galba didn't. And, well, that opened a door for yours truly. When Galba finally made his way to Rome, I was ready. I had the support of the Praetorian Guard, who were just as tired of his frugal ways as I was. I offered them a nice little bribe, donation, and, like any smart investor, they put their faith in me. Oh, how they cheered when I was proclaimed emperor! I'm sure the coins in their pockets had nothing to do with it. I imagine you're thinking, Otho, you hypocrite! Didn't you just criticize Nero for his greed and excess? And to that, I say, oh, the irony. Yes, I did. And no, I won't apologize. I saw an opportunity and I took it. Better me than some other fool. Besides, I thought I could do better. I thought I could be the emperor Rome needed. After all, how hard could it be to rule Rome better than Nero or Galba? Spoiler, harder than you might think. But let's not rush to judgment. I haven't even taken you through my first glorious days on the throne. Stay tuned, dear viewer, for the next part, where I attempt to steady a rocking ship, face my first true challenge, and learn that ruling Rome might be a bit more complicated than I anticipated. Next, we will delve into the comparison and contrast of my reign with those who came before me. How did I fare compared to the likes of Nero and Galba? Was I any different? And more importantly, did Rome fare any better under my rule? Or did I simply fall into the same traps that had ensnared my predecessors? You be the judge. I'm just here to tell my side of the story. Ah, my reign. Such a grand term for something that lasted all of 3 months. But as they say, it's not the length that matters, it's what you do with it, right? And in those few short weeks, I like to think I made a bit of a mark, though perhaps more of a smudge, if we're being brutally honest. Yet, a smudge is better than a stain, and Rome had seen plenty of those under Nero. Now, let's talk about Nero for a moment, shall we? Oh, how Rome wept when he died. Well, some of Rome, anyway. The rest of the city breathed a sigh of relief. After all, who could forget the Great Fire of 64 AD? The lyre playing, the theatrics, the bizarre obsession with Greek culture. Nero wanted to be remembered as a great artist, but all he did was paint Rome with blood and ashes. And then there was Galba. Come on, he was the complete opposite of Nero. No flair, no charm, no sense of fun. Just an old man clutching his coins and preaching about discipline. Rome had gone from one extreme to another. Was it any wonder they were ready for something or someone different? Enter me, Otho, the compromise candidate, not as mad as Nero, not as dull as Galba. I promised stability, fairness, a return to reason. I even tried to curb the excesses of Nero's reign. I restored statues that he had removed, sought to calm the unrest he had stirred. I was determined to show Rome that one could be both just and strong, fair and feared. For a moment, it seemed like I might just pull it off. The Senate was on my side. The people cheered my name in the streets. I had, at least for a little while, the best of both worlds. But here's the twist. Remember those Praetorians I bribed, rewarded for their support? They weren't the only soldiers in the empire. Far from it. and not all of them were thrilled with a compromise candidate. Enter Vitellius, the governor of Germania Inferior. Vitellius was every bit the military man I wasn't big, brutish, and beloved by his legions. And more importantly, he was ambitious. He declared himself emperor, and his legions marched on Rome. Here was the first real test of my reign. How did I compare to Nero and Galba in the face of a true threat? I had hoped to rule with wisdom, but now I faced war. Nero would have fled to his theatre. Galba would have tried to cut the soldiers' pay even further. But I decided to fight. I prepared my troops, rallied my supporters, and readied myself for battle. And why not? I had the support of the Senate, the Praetorians, and the people. Or so I thought. What did I learn? That support can be as fickle as a summer breeze. As Vitellius's forces approached, my support began to waver. The Praetorians, it seemed, were more interested in gold than glory. The Senate, well, they're always good at hedging their bets. And the people? They cheered the loudest for whoever promised the most bread and circuses. And so, as Vitellius's legions drew nearer, I faced a choice: to fight a battle I was unlikely to win, or to surrender and save the lives of my men and the city from further bloodshed. It was a choice that would define my brief reign, a choice that we will explore more deeply in the next part. Stay with me, dear viewer, for next we shall talk of my death. But not just any death, my chosen death. Yes, you heard right, I chose my fate, because when it came down to it, I would rather die with honour than live with the shame of seeing Rome torn apart once more by civil war. Spoiler alert, Vitellius takes Rome, but he doesn't keep it for long. And me? Well, I leave behind a legacy, if only a small one, and so onward we go to the next chapter of my confession, where we find out just how an emperor meets his end, not with a whimper, but with a final, ironic smile. Ah, death the great equalizer, not something we Romans like to dwell on, despite our penchant for gladiatorial games and public executions. But for me, death was more than just a fate. It was a decision, a final act of defiance. You see, unlike so many others who wore the purple, I didn't cling to life when the tides turned against me. No, I chose my end, and if you're wondering why, let's take a walk down the path of my final days. Vitellius was coming, and his legions were eager for blood. I had a choice. I could flee, as Nero had, hiding in shame until some loyal servant finally put me out of my misery. Or I could fight, leading my men in a hopeless battle, spilling blood across the fields of Italy. But I was no Nero, and I had learned, unlike Galba, that there are battles you can win, and battles that are not worth the cost. So I chose neither to run nor to fight. Instead, I chose to die. I gathered my closest advisors, made arrangements for the safety of those loyal to me, and then prepared myself for the inevitable. Some called it cowardice. I called it mercy. Mercy for my men, mercy for Rome. The city had seen enough blood. I would not add to its rivers of red. The night before I ended my life, I sat alone in my tent. I could hear the distant sounds of soldiers, the soft murmur of men preparing for a battle they knew was lost. I wrote a letter to my sister. Yes, I had a sister, though history hardly remembers her. I told her not to grieve, that my death was my choice, and that in some strange way I had found peace. It was the calm before the storm, the eye of a hurricane. I remember thinking how still everything seemed, how quiet. The calm before the end. Then, with the dawn, I called my closest friends, bade them farewell, and took the blade to my own flesh. A single, clean cut. Well, not that clean, if I'm being honest. I won't glamorize it. Death is messy, even for an emperor. But it was quick, and as I bled out, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. No more games, no more politics, no more battles. Just peace. I can almost hear you, dear viewer, whispering, "Was it worth it, Otho? Was that final act of defiance worth all you gave up?" Well, here's the irony. Yes, I think it was. In choosing my death, I chose my legacy. A legacy not of cruelty or cowardice, but of a man who in the end chose to put Rome above himself. A man who chose to end his own life rather than plunge the empire into yet another civil war. And yet, my death was just the beginning of Rome's troubles. Vitellius took Rome, as I knew he would, but he didn't hold it for long. The city would soon find itself in the throes of chaos once more, with more emperors rising and falling like the tides. Perhaps I was a fool to think I could stop the tide with a single act, but at least I tried. At least I tried. Next, we turn to my legacy. If such a short reign can leave one, did my death change anything? Did it make a difference? Or was it just another chapter in the long, bloody tale of Rome's decline? Stay with me, dear viewer. There's still more to this story, and I promise you, it's not over yet. Up next, we will explore what Rome remembers or doesn't of its brief Emperor Otho. Was I a hero, a fool, or something in between? The jury, as they say, is still out. Ah, my legacy. What a word for such a fleeting moment in the grand tapestry of Rome's history. I imagine you're curious. What does Rome remember of me, Otho, the emperor who ruled for a mere 3 months in the infamous year of the 4 emperors? Am I seen as a tragic figure, a noble failure, or just another name in a long list of rulers who didn't quite make the cut? Let's unravel that mystery together, shall we? Rome, it seems, has a peculiar way of remembering its leaders. Nero, for all his madness and mayhem, is immortalised in stories of cruelty and spectacle. Galba, poor soul, is remembered mostly for being boring and, let's face it, miserly. And what of me? Well, I'd like to think I'm remembered as the emperor who tried to do right by Rome, tried to bring stability, tried to make a stand when all seemed lost. But the truth, dear viewer, is that my legacy is not so easily defined. To some, I am a tragic figure, a man who, through a twist of fate and a dash of ambition, found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others see me as a coward, a man who chose death over the uncertainty of battle. I can't say they're entirely wrong. After all, what is history but a series of perspectives, often conflicting, always subjective? There are those, though, who see in my death a rare act of self-sacrifice. They say that by choosing to die, I saved Rome from more bloodshed. That, in a time when emperors clung to power until their last breath, I was a breath of fresh air, a ruler who knew when to step aside, even if stepping aside meant stepping into the afterlife. But let's not get too romantic. I knew full well that Vitellius's victory would be temporary, that Rome's struggles were far from over. My death was a statement, yes, but it was also an escape from a city, an empire, and perhaps even a self that I could no longer control. And so, my legacy is a mixed bag, part hero, part fool, and maybe a bit of both. But isn't that true of us all? The great irony, of course, is that I'm remembered more for how I died than how I ruled. But such is life or death, as it were. And who am I to complain? At least I'm remembered at all, which is more than can be said for many of my successors. Now, let's pivot for a moment. What can we learn from all this? From my life, my reign, my death? Was there a lesson in my brief tenure on the throne? A moral to this story? But that's for you to decide, dear viewer. For in the next and final part of my confession, we will delve into the ideals of equality, freedom, liberty, and democracy concepts that I, Otho, perhaps didn't fully appreciate in life, but have come to understand in death. Was I right in my actions? Did I truly serve Rome or just myself? And what can my story tell us about the nature of power, justice, and the eternal quest for a better world? Stay with me for the conclusion of my tale, where we will discuss these questions and more. We'll talk about what it means to rule, what it means to serve, and what it means to leave behind a legacy, however short or small. Next, we look at the ideals I might have missed in life, but have come to understand more clearly in death. Because even an emperor, especially a dead one, can learn a thing or two from history. Stay tuned. The best, or perhaps the most ironic part, is yet to come. And so, we come to the end of my tale, or is it just the beginning? You see, death has a funny way of sharpening one's perspective. In life, I was often blinded by ambition, pride, and the ceaseless need to prove myself first to Nero, then to Galba, and finally to Rome itself. But here, in the quiet of the afterlife, I've had plenty of time to reflect on those grand ideas of equality, freedom, liberty, and democracy. Concepts that, I'll admit, didn't feature heavily in my reign, but have since taken on a new meaning. I know what you're thinking. Otho, what do you, a Roman emperor, know about democracy? Fair point. Democracy, as we understand it today, was not exactly the Roman way. We were more about the rule of the few, the powerful, the wealthy, the Senate, the aristocracy, the emperors. We were the ones who called the shots, for better or worse. But here's the kicker. Even in a system as seemingly rigid as Rome's, there was always room for ideas, always room for change. Did I believe in these ideals in life? If I'm honest, not really. I was too busy clawing my way up the ladder, trying to secure my place in a world that was always on the brink of chaos. I played the game of power because that was the only game I knew. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, and a good deal of time to think, I see things differently. Equality? It's not just a concept for the masses. It's the foundation of any stable society. Freedom and liberty? They're not just lofty ideals. They're the very air that a civilization needs to breathe. And democracy? Perhaps it's not a perfect system, but it's a darn sight better than leaving everything in the hands of a few power-hungry nobles. Would I have ruled differently if I had understood this back then? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But I'd like to think that even in my short time, I made some choices that leaned toward justice, toward fairness. After all, I chose to die rather than lead Rome into another destructive civil war. I chose to sacrifice myself for what I believed was the greater good. Does that count for something? I'd like to think so. And so, dear viewer, I leave you with this. History is not just a record of the past, but a guide for the future. My life and death are but a small chapter in Rome's grand narrative, a cautionary tale of ambition, power, and the choices we make. Learn from it, laugh at it, scoff at it if you must. But remember, even the most flawed among us can offer a lesson or two. Before I go, I have a small request. If you ever find yourself wandering the ancient streets of Rome, visit the places I once walked, stand where I stood, feel the weight of history under your feet. Maybe even collect a coin or two, an Otho denarius if you can find one. Hold it in your hand and think of the stories it could tell. And finally, thank you for listening to my tale. You've been a gracious audience, more patient than many a senator I've known. If you've enjoyed this glimpse into my life and times, consider exploring more with us. Our channel, Renaissance Spirit, is devoted to the pursuit of a just, equitable, and humane world. We dive deep into topics that matter: history, politics, culture, society, justice, and, of course, ancient Rome. Always a mirror reflecting the complexities of our modern world. The Renaissance was more than an era. It was a rebirth, a rekindling of the human spirit's thirst for knowledge. It was the dawn of enlightenment, the age of reason. And so, I invite you to embrace this spirit of curiosity, to seek truth, to learn, and to grow. Because understanding our shared past is the key to unlocking our collective future. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with your friends. Explore the other videos on our channel. You might find a story or two that speaks to you. And before you go, why not take our quiz to see if you have the heart of a Renaissance spirit? Vive Renaissance Spiritus! History is not dead far from it. It lives on in every lesson we learn, every choice we make, every step we take towards a better world. Until next time, remember, the past is never really past, It's always with us, whispering in the winds of time, waiting to be heard. Farewell, my friends, farewell.